Loving your enemies can be a good thing. A minister was giving a homily based on Jesus' command to love your enemies. Now, I bet many of us feel as if we have enemies in the world. So raise your hands if you feel like you have many enemies. And quite a few people raise their hands. Now, raise your hands if you feel like you only have a few enemies. And about half as many people raise their hands. Now raise your hands if you only have one or two enemies. And a couple people raise their hands. So see, most of us feel like we have enemies. Now raise your hand if you have no enemies whatsoever. And he looked around the congregation, and way in the back, an old man raised his hand. And he said, I have no enemies whatsoever. The minister, delighted, invited the man to the front of the church. What a blessing! How old are you? I am 98 years old and I have no enemies. What a wonderful life you lead. And tell us how you end up with no enemies. All the bastards have died! So the 98-year-old is happy now, but it took 97 years for his enemies to die off. Loving your enemy can put you in a happy situation sooner than 98 years. Hating is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill your enemy. The poison acts slow because you're consuming it yourself. So hating your enemies can block your good. One of my friends had a housemate, and she had an argument with her housemate. And after the argument was over, she kept going over the argument in her head, thinking about what she wanted to have done, what she should have said, and how the argument should have gone. And while she was obsessed with this, she was missing the beautiful day. She was missing all the love from all her friends. All the joy in her life was invisible to her. It was blocked by the hatred, by the need to be right for her enemy. So this is what we hope to achieve by turning it around, is to stop it from blocking your good. And if you do become obsessed with your enemies, it can lead to long-term stress that can depress the immune system, cause insomnia and irritability. This is from a Harvard study. Hating your enemy makes your life materially worse. So loving your enemy can be a good thing. So how do you do this? So Matthew Henry was a minister in England in the early 1700s. A man once stole his wallet. And in reflecting on the incident, Matthew Henry said, 1, I'm thankful he never robbed me before. 2, I'm thankful that although he took my wallet, he did not take my life. 3, although he took all that I had, it was not very much. So all of these is gratitude about his situation, about the good that he's noticing in an awful situation. But the fourth one, I'm glad it was I who was robbed and not I who did the robbing. And this is really the key. He flips it around. He is the fortunate one. The poor robber is doomed to a life of crime, or is in the middle of a life of crime. And you could pray for him. Matthew Henry or we could pray for the robber, that the robber manages to escape the life of crime, that the robber manages to find the good in life and not have to do ill to people. Harvard Medical School cites studies indicating gratitude is good for us. Matthew Henry finds ways to be grateful. So Matthew Henry found he could love his enemy for not being worse to him, and he prayed that his enemy might escape a life of crime. In Matthew 5:43-45, Jesus says, You've heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and praise for those who persecute you, that you may be children of our Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So love your enemies and pray for them. For why hate a child of God if you can be happier appreciating the good? Remember, loving your enemies can be a good thing for you. There was the man who spent a lifetime, almost a century, hating his enemies, but then was free at the very end. Matthew Henry was grateful not to be a robber and got to pray that the robber would mend his ways. Loving and praying for your enemies can be a positive practice. You're practicing prayer, you're moving hate and adding more love to your life. So why not love what's good in a child of God? So love your enemies, and it can improve your life. Thank you.